SpotlightOnPodcast.com/store is the place to go to get a Spotlight On collectible for the music and arts lover in your life, or maybe even yourself. Go to SpotlightOnPodcast.com/store today. Hello and welcome to Spotlight On, a production of 23 Media Ventures. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. Today, the spotlight shines on Juno Award-winning oud player and guitarist Gordon Grdina. Gordon's work defies limitations, be they geographical, distance, time, or genre. He incorporates avant-garde jazz, free improvisation, indie rock, and the Arabic tradition into his music. So much music, so many collaborators, so much ground to cover in our talk. We made the most of our time together, exploring his projects, processes, the fusion of musical traditions, appropriation, authenticity, and more. If you're open to the idea that music can be a tool for communication and understanding between people and peoples, Gordon Grdina will give you plenty to consider. Enjoy. I spent time listening to both of the newest records back and forth, back to back. Such a spectrum of sound.
I've been releasing things like that recently, kind of to try and complement each other as opposed to doing things that are similar at the same time. So that's the idea. They're both finished at the same time too, so quite easy.
I was curious about that. Do you, given how prolific you are, or have been, especially over the last few years, do you work on projects in parallel, or do you work on them linearly and then post-production happen? Like, do you have a method to your madness?
The duo record with Christian, we had recorded, I can't even remember now, but there's a different tour I was on. I had a few days off and I was close, so I could make it happen. But that was 2 years, I think, before it came out, or a year before it came out. So it's like capturing the kind of music is the most important thing. So trying to find that whenever I can get it, when it's happening, or when there's an opportunity to do it. And then I'm a little slow getting them finished. So I've got a few things finished and then deciding how to release them. So there's a process to it that way. But I'm always working on things at the same time. And they're really kind of project based, where it's this project's coming up. So I'm writing a whole bunch for this. I'm recording for this. And then once that's finished, then it's like right on to something else. The ADHD way of making music or something. But the key I've found, because I've had that disposition to want to be interested in a lot of different things and be thinking about them at the same time, is that when I'm doing them, I have to just 100% focus on what that is and what that project is. And then it works out. And then I've got a pretty streamlined post-production kind of setup for the most part, working with the same person. I work a lot with John Rayham in Vancouver, and I love the studio there. And whenever I have bands here, we'll record at that studio because I love it. We've got all the great amps. I love all the great sounds. And then we've got a pretty quick mixing kind of process. So the post-production goes pretty smooth, except there's exceptions, but for the most part, I do that, and that makes it streamlined.
Given how much of your work is essentially these different sets of collaborators or different collaborative contexts, do you record in person with the ensembles all the time, or are you one of these folks that you're moving files around and people are adding pieces, or is it more project specific?
At least for now, everything is really in person. That's the big, I haven't done much remote recording at all. That's the process. I like listening to a lot of music that isn't made that way. It's kind of a distinction I've started to develop. There's a dissimilar way in which sometimes I like listening to music as opposed to how I like to make it. I really like to make it in person with people doing it. And that's how I think I work best, and how it kind of works. It's instant. We're just playing and then I'm capturing it. But, I listen to all kinds of music that's pieced together like that sometimes. The only exceptions that have been is that the recording process is always that way. And then sometimes I've had a secondary studio process where I've edited and put things together and moved some things around and done that. That's happened only a couple times. It's happened on a record I did in Japan a few years ago with a band called The Twain, with Koichi Makagami, Michio Yagi, and Tamaya Honda. And it was 6 hours of music. So I kind of found a way to edit that all together into one long piece. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. So that's the one time that I've done that. And then also in this duo work record, we recorded a bunch of songs and then we did a bunch of improvs. And then I went through and did a little bit of editing and mixing together and putting them that way. So that's the most post-production way I've gotten into it. But the actual creation for me is really with the people in the room. It's what I found the best.
Yeah, it's really intriguing reading a little bit about how duo work came together. So much of the copy that I've read about the record emphasizes the use or your use of your MIDI setup.
Oh, yeah.
But something that struck me as a listener was when I think about some of the MIDI guitar sounds that more from when guitarists first started stumbling across the MIDI capability in the late 80s and early 90s, and people would try to make saxophone sounds and all this stuff. Whereas in this instance, I think other than like song 2 at the end of the record, that's like a sonic landscape that doesn't seem like it's capable of just a guitar, but a lot of it just seemed like exploratory guitar. Like it wasn't this notion of like, here's a guitar player trying to sound like a horn section or something like that. And I very much appreciated that it didn't lose the guitarness.
Oh, good. Nice. That's been the concept, is that I didn't want to be a band in a box kind of situation. That wasn't what I was trying to do. The idea was just a sonic thing. It was just trying to have like, I want to add these colors to what's happening. And the whole setup and how I made it, it's been somewhat difficult. I'm not a great techie guy for sure. Even guitar pedals, I've never been like completely in. I love the sounds and working with it, but I get exhausted. Some people love that. I just want to make music and have it happen. So I don't want to, but that was a similar thing. Is it took a while to get, because the interface, I wanted to be completely natural so I can improvise and do whatever I want and just play what I'm hearing. But then I've got this new kind of palette of sounds that I can also use. It's taken a while to get there. And during the process of making the record, we didn't have any of those sounds while we were making it. I have a sort of like big guitar sound set up where I split, and I've got like bass and guitar going at the same time through amps. And that's how we played it. So everything's just live off the floor. And then while that was happening, I tracked MIDI, but we weren't listening to it. So then I could take that information and then add colors and everything I wanted to later in the studio.
Wow.
So that's how that kind of came about. And then now, since we've been working on it, or I've been working on my setup, is now I've got a live setup where I can have all that and switch between them on the fly as a kind of bigger palette, so that I can do that in the moment and not have it be like, oh, it'd be nice if this line had that sound of acoustic bass, or if this line had that sound of strings or keys or something. So now we can be playing live, and I've got a new setup where I can it's like guitar foot pedal. So it's got this instantaneous thing. So it's very guitaristic and just an extension of what I'm already doing in a sonic state, more than like I couldn't afford to hire a bass player. And then it was also like Christian's such a force and such a sonic player. He sounds like this whole MIDI system in one. So it was kind of like trying to match that space with something and add like a bigger kind of sound.
There was really some cool interplay. Like there was one part, one of the tracks, I apologize, I don't recall which one, but it sounds like you're working on the volume knob or something, but it's this stutter stop effect you're going with, and he's just right there. And you guys are sort of having this great conversation between the drums and the guitar. But sort of a fleeting moment. It was great. It's fun.
Oh, nice.
A moment ago, you self-identified as not very techie, but what you then just elaborated, there's some work there. Do you have like a technology Sherpa? Are you experimenting? Like, how did you get to the live rig? Is that just you out in the wilderness figuring it out?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of that. I've got a couple of friends that I would like consult with that are more in that world and do a lot more MIDI stuff. And I was using like Logic. That's how originally I found all my sounds there and made a bunch of samples, because that was a recording process at first. But then I found out that program isn't great for live. So then my friend was like, you need to be using this program. So I had to learn Ableton or like a new program for it. So that was new. And then we actually did our debut live duo concert in Belgium in February when the album was released. And then I figured out the whole system, got a MIDI pedal, figured that out online, like which ones will work, like a controller, or I've got a controller, a foot switch, so that I can switch things from Ableton with my feet, because most people just use knobs and use their hands, but I want to be able to do it on the fly. So I finally got that fixed, and then it broke like the day before I left.
Of course.
So I called all these people. I was in a panic and found one and learned it on the plane. And then I finally got it on the plane, got there and had a day to get it to work, and it worked. So it's been a bit of a learning curve figuring that out, but it's been me doing that. And then just everything's on the internet now. It was very good to do, can find it out that way. And then when I had really specific things that I couldn't find, because some of the things I was doing, and like I've got some new ideas I want to do as well, are like they're not really what people use it for regularly.
You obviously have a working history with Christian, but I wonder, could you peel back a layer on that and tell me a little bit more about the genesis of your relationship? Like how did you two encounter each other and this ongoing dialogue now you have musically?
It's funny. I was on tour with another great drummer from here, Kenton Lowen in Vancouver, and a great horn player, Gunter Heinz from Germany, from Dresden, which is also Christian's kind of hometown. And we played this small festival. I can't remember the name of it right now. And we played with this trio. It was a strange festival, like a real weird mix of music. And some of it, like at the time, we were just not into it at all. But we stayed all the way to the end. And there was one more band at the end. We had no idea what it was. And it was Hyperactive Kid, which is Christian and Philip Grouper and Ronnie. It was killing it. And we were just like, what is this now? Like, this whole festival happened, and all of a sudden this incredible thing happens at the end. And we just loved it. And I met them then, and I was like, oh man, this is incredible. Loved his playing. And that was it. We kind of kept in touch, all those guys, because, kindred spirits. And then I had a trio that I'd started with Shazad and Matt Maneri. And we had done a few gigs, and I was really loving what we had going on, but I felt like I wanted to add something to it. And then, I thought, oh man, Christian would be great for this. So then we had a recording session, brought him in, or he came over, we did a little tour, and it just worked perfectly. And that was Square Peg, which is another band we have. And then we actually have another record in the can that I'm working on currently.
Of course you do.
But so that's kind of where it really like solidified that relation. And then we did some tours with them, did some tours with Matt and Christian trio, and sort of developed out of that. And then the duo.
Matt Maneri's name comes up a lot in these conversations. I hear a lot of folks play with Matt Maneri, and I haven't had him on yet, but I'm going to have to track him down. But I that's a name that I encounter. He's prolific.
Yeah, he's prolific, and he's quite a unique boy. There's no one like Matt. He's incredible. He adds his thing. He's quite a unique individual and fits into everything. It's like and he's interested and excited about all kinds of different music. Yeah, I love playing with him.
We pivot to talk about the Marrow. I wanted to ask you also, what's the live music scene like for you for more of the improvised and sort of creative music, lack of a better way to say it, the avant-garde, instrumental, improv, jazz stuff? Are you having to leave Canada and North America mainly to work, or are there opportunities? Is there a scene in Vancouver? Like, could you break that down a little for me?
I mean, I feel like there's a scene everywhere. There's a scene in Vancouver. I mean, I came out of it. We were very lucky. There's a jazz festival here. Ken Pickering ran it for years and had a great love of European improvised music and American. Like, there's people that are kind of like stars in this scene in Vancouver that aren't in North America or like in the rest of Canada even. That kind of really developed the scene. And he was great about mixing. So he, like the generation older than me, were like the first ones that really got to play with all these Europeans, and they really got all these connections started happening. And because Vancouver in particular is so isolating, there's all this trade problems with the US, so that we can't just go over and play music. So you get stuck, and then you can't go to Seattle, and then going east takes forever till you get somewhere. That isolation was helped by these people coming in, and it really fostered this scene every year. So like when I grew up, I already knew a lot of these musicians. I feel like the city kind of punched above its weight for how big it is or something like that. So it was really helped advance the sort of avant-garde music or experimental music. Plus, because it's a little smaller, everybody plays with everybody. So you end up with this cross-genre stuff happening. So that like there's a lot of straight ahead guys playing with free guys, and a lot of global music happening, world music happening. There's a huge like Persian community here. So all these things blended together. So it's quite an interesting scene. But yes, I've been traveling a lot more. And that's sort of like just trying to get out because I'm from here. So it starts to feel like a small city, even though it's got amazing players and there's incredible music happening. You want to keep expanding. So I have been moving, a lot, spent a lot of time in New York, a lot of time in Europe, and making more connections and traveling more. So I could play this music really regularly in Vancouver, but I've kind of been stepping back and I'm less involved in the scene in Vancouver as of late, just because of logistics and time and everything, and focused on projects and traveling more. But I do find that there is a kind of scene everywhere, because I feel like it's one of those things that it doesn't take that many people to make the scene happen, because the experience of the music is so important for people that you just need a few people that really get it. And then they kind of like really get it and really want to do it. So it builds up these set of connections where there's like, okay, there's places to play and there's people really pushing it, because it changes your life a bit, or some kind of like gives this thing where you're like, this has to happen. This is what I'm missing. And I feel like that happens all over the world. So there is these pockets everywhere.
I moved to Seattle about 8 years ago, and I was in New York for a long time, most of the 90s until the mid-teens. And as you know, you can't throw a rock without hitting somewhere for people to play or to find adventurous, interesting music. And there's a downtown scene, and now so much going on in Brooklyn. It's New York, and everybody knows what's there. And I came out here very much with a lot of preconceived notion about what would be and what wouldn't be here. And it's been really exciting, especially coming out of the pandemic, to see that, to your point, there's a handful of people that really are driving some interesting locations for music, not necessarily traditional venues, although a couple of club type settings as well, but some really phenomenal players. Because I think there's really good day job type work here. There's a lot of educators here. A lot of people came here from other places, so they're bringing different traditions and different packs of players that come through town. But I think the other thing that strikes me about some of these scenes is that because it draws from so many different types of music, you get free jazz, improvised, people now from an electronic music background that are melding improvisation with that. You even get some of like hardcore heavy metal scenes. I think of like some of the John Zorn projects that are just like these melting pots of musics. And when you put those in different cities, it gives you more of a base to draw from, actually, than like an indie rock band or something like that. Like
that's one of the things I think that make it like avant-garde will never die, because it especially in this scenario, is because it is that free, open aspect of it, which is what you need to have. It is open to all those things. So when you have that, it's the antithesis of like music made for money, which is trying to really define something so that you can package it and sell it. It's the opposite. So all those things, all those different genres, that's inherent in making the music, that you'll be open to these things. So it's like wherever you are, wherever that is, it's about making the music with whoever's there and whatever's happening at that time. So it really is this thing that just flourishes and has so many unique sounds and unique ways of doing it that it can't stop.
Yeah. This may not be an original thought, but it strikes me talking to you about this, that one may be more likely to be interested in the avant-garde across musics than they might be about the mainstream of any one given music. Like I can think from my own, as a sort of focus group of one, like I'll listen to some more extreme hardcore noise music than I will like contemporary metal.
Oh yeah.
Like I like the fringes of that more than I like I couldn't even give you an example, but there might be there than that. And so you're drawing similar to like, I guess, the mysticism being behind all of the mainstream sort of spiritual paths, right? Like a mystic would understand Kabbalah, would understand Sufism, would relate to a Christian mystic, but might not be very interested in the orthodoxy of any of those paths. There's a there, I think.
I can see that. That partially also comes back to the thought I had about liking a whole bunch of different musics, but not necessarily the process of how they're done. Is that same scenario, is that there's a lot of avant-garde things. So I'm like, wow, I'm really inspired by that, what I'm hearing. But then you think, oh man, I'd like to do something like that. And then you get into thinking about how you would make that. And it'd be like, that doesn't sound very exciting to me. Like how that's done. So then I don't want to do that, but I want to be inspired by what that sound is and then have that come into my process of how it works. And that's a similar thing to the mainstream situation, as it being like the mainstream version of it can be exciting, but then you're like, oh, but it doesn't have all these other things or something. It doesn't have as much depth or something. So that makes you kind of interested, the more peripherals of everything.
Is there a wall or like a demilitarized zone for you between the guitar and the oud? And what I mean by that is, do you ever do any of the more experimental or electroacoustic things with the oud that you're doing with the guitar? Do you slap the MIDI pickups on it? Do you process it? Or are those two different worlds?
They're not two different worlds for sure. Like I was just mentioning, I just did a solo concert last night. It was first time I've ever actually done it with just acoustic oud and acoustic steel string guitar. So I got a new in like 1930s Gibson that I love. So I was playing that, and I haven't done that before, but I was noticing how I play now for both things is almost becoming the same and sounding less and less like an Arabic oud player and less like guitar player. They're kind of just, because I noticed I was going, wow, these are turning into the same thing. It's just like this little sonic change. So it's unifying more, I think, all those things. So then a lot of the opposite processes started to happen. But the processing, I do have like a mic, and I do sometimes process the oud through guitar pedals. I don't do MIDI stuff with it, but there's been a few things that have come up with it being processed that way, but I haven't totally explored that a ton yet. I've more been focused on the sort of the acoustic timbre of the instrument for most things, but it isn't because it's divided and I want it a certain way and want this a certain way. When I first started learning the instrument, I was really divided because I needed to learn it and understand in order to feel like I could use it and play it. And because of the love of the music, I wanted to really honor what that music is as best that I can. But it's such a history and such a sound with that music. You're kind of like delving into a whole new world that was new to me. So I studied it really specifically to try and understand as best I could what's happening there. So that was when I was more specific. And then since then, when I'm like, okay, well, that's sort of like a study. That's not really like me being me. So then once I've had that as a study and part of my skill set, then I can make my music. And then that comes with some nods and homage to this whole other history and this whole other sound of creation. So I'm not trying to speak for Arabic music. I'm being me with this instrument, and it's paying homage to all these great people that are come out of this history.
We'll be back with more Spotlight On right after this break. Did you know that Spotlight On is completely self-funded by the team that produces it? We're looking for ways to keep the podcast self-sufficient without sacrificing the listener experience or the integrity of the show. The best way we could think of was to ask for the support of our listeners. Please consider making a donation to help cover our annual operating expenses. Go to spotlightonpodcast.com and click the word donate. If you can, please do. And if you cannot, please continue to enjoy the show. We're happy to have you as a listener. Thanks. And now, back to Spotlight On. I would imagine, and I've talked to other Western-born players who play Eastern instruments or instruments from those traditions, and I wonder how you navigate perceptions or feelings, or whether you have any concerns around things like exoticism or even kitsch, or a more extreme version could be musical colonialism, or like, are these notions in your consciousness ever? And do you have to wrestle with that? Or is it just like, it's about purity of intent?
Yeah, of course. That's been a big thing. And it it's a range of things. If you're going to be dogmatic to a certain point, then no one's ever allowed to create anything, because all music is some sort of combination of other things and influences that come from people and what they hear. And I can't not have heard what I've heard. So for me, there's a process of intent, which is a big one, and then authenticity. Like what makes something authentic. And it's like, I feel like it is something that has to do with time spent and like what you've done for that music. So the time spent with the instrument gives you authenticity on what that is. And then that gives you sort of like an ability to understand this whole, like a whole other music making process. So in that sense, that allows you to be able to make music and connect with people in different traditions and be able to have something to say and to talk to them like you would in any conversation. And sort of celebrating those differences in how you are creates these new things. So when I'm playing with more traditional musicians in different styles or something, we're having a conversation between two people. And part of mine is my interest in what they're doing and how they're doing something. Yeah. And then I'm not trying to take advantage of them. I want to create with them. It goes both ways. So they're both having a conversation which interacts with one another. I'm not trying to take advantage of them in my process. I'm trying to have all of us have an exchange in what's going on. So in that sense, it's a thing, but it's a constant awareness of what's happening, because you can step over that line in some sense. And then also like just become too timid and not able to speak the way you want to speak. And I came to a lot of those conclusions when I'm studying, like really trying to play Arabic oud and figure out how these people are. It's the same thing as me understanding jazz music, or when I first started understanding blues music. And it's like blues, to be an authentic blues player doesn't mean that you have to have suffered in any real physical sense, but it's like you have to live with the music. Like you have to really know what's happening there. And then sometimes that is part of it, but like that comes out and the jazz comes out, and it depends on what you can do, you know, and like being honest with what you're able to connect with and then express. And the reason that you connect with it in a certain way and are able to express that is because you kind of have similar things. You're speaking from a similar place. So it's like I had to do the same thing with jazz. And then at a certain point, I'm not authentic enough for jazz. So someone's always going to be pissed. It's like the jazz musicians I loved, this is exactly what they were doing. So that kind of thing, you kind of have to weed through and see who is pushing a certain thing because that's the way they feel. And then how you're honest with what you want to do, who you love, how you're expressing it. And I feel like each individual needs to kind of answer that for themselves into how they actually feel, whether this is like a real honest thing that they're trying to express.
I'd say this from probably a position of some privilege, given who I am and my background. But what you just articulated, it also strikes me as that's the beauty in all these musics, is their ability to have these dialogues across time and space and culture and backgrounds. Again, I don't want to sound naive, but to me, that's very beautiful.
You talk to musicians want to play with each other. Yeah. Like all these political things, and they're much more complex than it. Like musically, we're all humans. So whenever you do this, you speak directly to what it means to be human. And sound is a thing that's directly what it means to be human. Even the meaning out of the poetry, when you don't understand the poetry, but you hear what someone's saying, you get this thing from it. It's not specifically what the words were, but you get this deeper understanding of what they're trying to express. And we all share that because we all are stuck in the human condition. We all have things and varying degrees of suffering and joy and everything that we all live in our lives. We're just trying to connect with each other. And I feel like music is this place where you can connect with everyone no matter what. And it's very beautiful and a great way to show how the world should be, because deep down, that is how it is. We're all more connected than we're not, you know?
Yeah.
You know, without sounding too naive about it. But that's like sort of a utopian way because all this other shit gets in the way. But that really is when you play music, you can just do that. You can play with, I've never had a situation where I've gone to play music with someone and they've been like, I won't play with this guy because of this political thing or something like that. I haven't had that situation happen. Well, that's also maybe the people I choose to play with. And this music, because it's very open, I'm sure that has happened. Anyway, I'm just mean like that. That's been my experience.
I think a lot of this relates also to the fact that, you know, you said something earlier about you did the work, like you went and studied, you weren't a dilettante with the instrument.
Yeah.
And I wonder, as you immerse yourself in the music and the tradition and the instrument, and then you started to reemerge back into making your own music and figuring out how to incorporate all this, how familiar were you, or how much did you look at other figures who had attempted similar things? Like I think of Ornette Coleman, obviously, as an obvious one, or to an extent, obviously Coltrane. You know, I've talked to other oud players in particular, mentioned Lloyd Miller as someone who very early on tried to bridge American or Western jazz with Eastern music. I was not familiar with Lloyd Miller until I was turned on to it. I would encourage you to go back and listen to him, like music from like the 50s, early 60s, I think, maybe. Yeah. In that era when, in America, especially, like exoticism was a thing. People were into Hawaii and Polynesian stuff, and Asian exoticism was very kitschy. he was making a very authentic hybrid of jazz and Persian music, even to the extent of tried to learn Farsi, like very earnest.
Oh, I have to check that out.
But along those lines, for me, my entryway into a lot of this music, and again, I don't think this is an incredibly original pathway, but was Simon Shaheen, and particularly his record of the music of Muhammad Abdel Wahab, which,
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's one of my favorite albums to this day. And
I was on tour one time. We went down. It was with like a avant-garde rock band. The band was like, there was actually like a kind of scrap on stage. And look, it wasn't like a super harmonious band. We were in there for a while. We went to Seattle and we came back. We played this gig and one summer did kind of piss someone off. And it was upsetting. And we were trying to find music to play on the radio and everyone didn't want to hear anything. And then I was like, hey, check this out. And I put on that record and we listened to it 4 times. Like it never stopped. Everyone just shut up and was just like, God damn, that music just hits everyone. Like you listen to that and you're like, God damn, you know, that's that power of connecting those things. And that, I mean, Simon Shaheen for me was really huge with the Oud, that his record with Vishwa Molambat, where that's a fusion right there that happened. That's like the first time I heard the Oud and it just blew my mind that sound could happen on an instrument. And I was like, I love it. And then I just started listening to all kinds of different oud players. And so that's kind of where it came in. But I think because of when I was quite young, like 13, learning guitar and learning how to play blues and improvise, I just loved improvising right from the start. As soon as I played guitar, it was like improvising. So you get a pentatonic scale, I was like, I'm done. I'm good. And then everything just built out of there. I got interested in jazz and all these things, but I had a great teacher who was really good at just showing me new music. Every week he'd come with different CDs. And so the concept of bridging things together or connecting them was early on. So the concept of not doing that is more weird to me.
yeah,
So the concept of we're going to only make music, jazz music, but it's from the 50s, like that kind of concept or something just is completely foreign to how I feel, think, and everything to do with how I think about music. So the fusion of like thinking, okay, well, this is Eastern, this is Western, mixing them together is just, I always listened to them together. It didn't really, there wasn't really that many people. I was like, oh, what am I going to do to put these together? It's just, I already heard it. It was just like, that's what it is. Even like the record I made with Gary Peacock and Paul Motion, playing that music, I was hearing the oud with those guys because I saw so many similarities between free improv and Taksim because of the Arabic music, how much they modulate, and particularly the way Gary and that sort of like more the Gary Paul Blay vibe and him and Paul Motion, how they play together. So then when we went to record that, I wanted to do that for sure. That was like, I wanted to have the oud. I remember we were doing one thing and Paul was like, man, I don't know what the hell you want. We're playing this thing in 7 and you know, he's like, I don't know what the hell you want. This isn't working. And I was like, no, this is exactly what I want. Like this thing, I want you to just like do you on this thing. And me and Gary had this. And then, you know, the record comes back and he's like, man, I love that shit. You know, it's his favorite thing out of it, you know?
that's some heady company, man, to be in. Wow. Oof.
Oh yeah. Paul Motion, I only did the recording a couple days. I worked them quite hard now that I think about it, being much older and like looking at it and like, oh man, I worked them way harder than I should have. But that was great. And then, you know, we only had a few interactions, Paul and I, but Gary, I studied with 5 years.
Yeah.
We were really tight for a period. He was one of the few people that sort of like completely changed my understanding of music.
Could you easily sum up how?
Gary studied biology in Japan. So he had this amazing way of articulating organic construction.
Systems.
Yeah, totally. And going through school was easy for me because technically I had figured out a bunch of things already, but the conception of people there and the teachers was really like A plus B equals C. And it just went away. I knew they were wrong. Basically, I'd go to school and I'd just be like, this is bullshit, but I couldn't really articulate exactly what was happening. And working with Gary and understanding how he hears music really changed everything to be the point that was like, he could articulate all the things that no one talks about. He can articulate. So as you're sitting there and you talk, oh man, like the magic that's this thing or something, or like everyone's got those records where they're like, what the hell's happening? How does this happen? Gary's got a wonderful way of articulating all those things. So all the nooks and crannies that were these mystery spots in music that I couldn't get anybody to talk about or think about, Gary just could really articulate those things. So that was one way. He kind of changed the way I think about music and hear about it.
Quick aside, I saw Simone Shaheen once. There was a festival in New Haven, Connecticut. Got to be 30 years ago now. And he played, his performance was in a chapel at Yale on the campus. It was performance and demonstration. So he played the oud, told stories about the instrument, played violin, and it was real like a demonstration of the music. And it was so accessible and so beautiful, not watered down. You know, it was like he said, here's a platter with all this delicious food on it. Let me tell you what I've prepared for you.
Wow.
I remember like it was yesterday. I can remember where I was sitting, the angle at which I was watching it. It was really stunning.
Wow.
What a gift. Yeah.
It's incredible.
So this has been a while ago now, a year and a half. Mark Elias was on, and he was on with Jane Ira Bloom. They did a record during the pandemic with Bobby Previtt. They recorded together, but remotely. Something I talked to about with them was I didn't read anything about the record before I listened to it. So I didn't really know. And I was so grateful because you couldn't tell. These improvisations they did together, they figured out the technology lag. They were able to be, through telepresence, create these improvisations together. Really phenomenal piece of work. But he's an amazing bass player. And his work on the Marrow, between him and the cello work, it just adds an element.
I remember Mark telling me about that recording too, where he goes, I knew there was a lag, he said, but when I was playing, there wasn't a lag. He's like, I could hear it. What you play, I'd respond to her as I'm responding to her. And then when I look at the recording, he goes, I was thinking it was going to be out and I'd have to fix it. He goes, but what was on the recording was what I heard.
It's really neat.
Yeah, Mark and I have had a relationship for a long time. We've done a lot of work together. He's a really close friend. But that band, the Marrow, started with Hank and Mark. We had a trio. We actually played for the Oud Festival. It's in New York, which I think is this weekend actually coming up. And there was the first one with the three of us, and it went really well. And this kind of connection started happening. And Mark used to play with Marcel Khalifa, so he's played a lot of Arabic music and has sort of an understanding about that. And Hank is just able to fit into any situation. He's kind of a lot like Matt Maneri. He's such a unique player with such an open and unique voice that he embraces the music and then brings his own voice to it in a real honest and loving way. So it's like he plays in a different way than he normally plays, but it's still him. And we all got along really well. And then once I added humming to the group, because I could see that working, there was big love fest. Everybody loves it. There's been a lot of the scenarios that in picking groups is, for the most part, I've been pretty good at having groups where everybody really gets along. And I find that really helps the whole cohesion of the band. So the core of the group kind of came out of that trio with Mark and Hank.
Could you tell us a little bit about sort of your relationship history with the Honari family?
Yeah. In university, they're a little bit younger than I am, but I was friends with Neil G. Dillon, this great tabla player. We had a group and I was playing guitar. I hadn't even started playing oud yet. He was good friends with Fathieh Honari, who's an amazing guitarist. We're in jazz school, so Neil's played saxophone and everybody else played tabla. And I was like, man, we should do a thing. So we started playing. Then I started playing the oud and instantly started a band. He found out that Fathieh plays tar and like even knew that tar was an instrument. Like, he figured that out. And I was like, wow, we should have a band. So we started playing. And that's the first thing, is that sort of through Neil, I met Hidayat, and then he's like, well, my brother plays. And then I was like, what? I got to know his brother. And then we had a group called Sangha, which was Hidayat and Hamid and Neelam Jeet. So it was tabla, tombak, daf, tar, and oud. And we wrote all these pieces, and it was a big learning curve for me, kind of figuring how these instruments can work together and how to write for it. And then I learned from their compositions, all this stuff. So we got to know each other. And then we'd usually rehearse at the Honari's house. So then I got to know his dad and his mom. And so that kind of took off from there. And then we started playing together, loved his dad, loved his mom, loved all of them. So we became really close, and then did a ton of albums. I mean, his dad would play. Then Hidayat, he was on the road for years playing guitar, and then moved to New York. And he's like one of the #1 pit musicians for theater in New York. He's a great guitar player as well as a great guitar player. So his dad started filling in for Hidayat when he was out of town on the road. So then he was part of the band, and then they had a group, and then I'd get to play with their group sometimes. And then I'd have some event, I'd hire them all. So that was my introduction to the sort of Persian music scene in Vancouver. We did a lot of touring, a lot of playing together, a lot of playing with Fathieh. So when we were doing this band, it was always in my head to, at some point, it'd be great if Fathieh, see if she would want to stay with us. So she did. That's how she came into this project.
Is there any particular challenge or maybe even benefit around the idea of having to move between, like, is it a big deal to be playing 12-tone and microtonal music? Do you have to use different parts of your brain or technique, or is that not really a big distinction?
It's more instrument focused, I guess. If I'm playing the oud, then it's like music aligns in a different way on the oud because it's a possibility. I do have a fretless guitar that I play in one project that's a smaller scale. So it feels almost like an oud, but it's tuned like a guitar. So that's like part where my brain still has to go, what the hell? It's like oud guitar. But the oud is very much like all those things are just intrinsic in how I play it. So it's not that big a change. So when I'm playing the oud, I'll just hear a thing and that's what I'm hearing because I'm used to hearing that on there. Whereas when I'm playing guitars, I guess I do sometimes. And then with the new MIDI thing, I've tuned some things to quarter tones so that I can play it. But it's more in an improvisational context of hearing things and playing through things. But on the oud, it's a lot more kind of intent driven, I guess. And there's pieces compositionally, that's where it is. And that's actually where a lot of it comes down to is whatever the moment is, like the whole goal of improvising is to like be exactly where you are when you're there. So we're playing a piece that has this, this, and this. I'm just in that world. That's what's happening. And so in that sense, when I'm writing a piece and it's like, this is just part of the world we're in now. And it changes. It can move around, but it's like, that's the thing. So then it just is, I guess, par for the course. If I was playing guitar trying to fit into that world and I couldn't, and I'm trying to like bend notes to get there, that's when my brain starts to explode. Because then now I've got to figure out how to get this thing that's just part of my fluidity in the other instrument.
That fretless guitar sounds like it's got some possibilities for exploration, though, as a sort of bridge instrument. That's really neat. I wanted to ask you a couple of quick things about being a label owner. The label seems to really now have a nice aesthetic, both across your projects, but this visual element that Genevieve brings to it with her photography. And I saw the cover for Duo Work first. We'll make sure we link to it so listeners of this audio medium can see it. But man, I don't know, man. It's just such a great album cover. But then equally in a different way, I mean, the packaging for the Marrow it's beautiful. It's just such a beautiful looking piece. I wonder, outside of being partners with your partner, how do you think about that element of your work? Because now it's not just music in a file or burned on a piece of plastic. There is this presentation. And I wonder, was that always important to you, or is that something new?
It's always been important to me. I should say the Duo Work record, that's kind of like a special one. That's actually Christian who did the cover for that.
Oh, really?
Christian and but it's funny because it's Christian and Catherine, his wife. She did that cover with him. When he sent it over, it was kind of like, you go, what about this? Like, it was like a quick thing. Jed and I saw the cover and we were like, oh my God, it's perfect. We loved it. And it actually, those photos come from her I think it's Catherine's mom who traveled, and it's all her like travel photos. So like, I don't know where it came from or what it is.
Beautiful.
And I don't think he even knows, but that one's from there. And then the other one, the aesthetic has always been there. Like we had this aesthetic, and then it's always been important. I've always been like biting my nails over what the cover looks like a little bit. And then with Jen, it's just like this great way of like I'll have an idea and I'll be like, oh, I found this piece of art. I'm thinking about it for this. And then we'll have a big discussion about it. She's like, this won't work. You have to do this. It's been a lot of different similarities. Like when we were doing the cover for the Twain, the Japanese record, we were like, went through a million different things trying to figure out an image that could capture the music until we came to the conclusion that we came up with an image that's the antithesis of the music. It's kind of what ended up happening. It was like, oh, then that made sense to us. We're like, that's the way it should be. And then a lot of it is like the cover and everything having its own appeal on its own, and then having some connection to the music as well. But it is that feeling of, it's like trying to make little visual art, you know?
Yeah.
Because like really, when you're buying CDs and albums, you're trying to buy this artifact that gives what you're doing more space and more presence, because the digital world is so fleeting and so unromantic.
So many of the artists that I speak to here have set up their own labels, imprints, maybe through distribution companies and what have you. And I get it from a financial point of view. It's not like there's somebody running around stroking $100,000 checks to improvised music artists to go live the dream.
Yeah.
But I wonder, like, is there an ambition, or is it simply a vehicle for you to articulate your projects through? Or like, do you see this as a platform for other musics, other artists, or do you have any vision around that?
As a kind of collaborative thing, it's always been left open to have other artists contribute or add to it. But I've got so many things happening, then it's kind of like filled it up, you know? So it basically is a vehicle for my works and what's happening. But I'm still looking for some projects on other labels because they'll make more sense, or maybe they'll be able to get it to a different audience that will help that particular album or that particular sound. Really, I'm trying to make a place with that label that's just like all my stuff in one spot, so you can see it over, like see all the things connect. Because I feel like the real statement is like the broadness of it and the different things together. When I didn't have it, I couldn't release things quick enough, which is one thing. But then the other thing was just like, I'd put out a record and it would get reviewed, and they would have missed like 3 records that have happened in between. So like they're relating this record to something that was like 4 years old. And it was like, well, you didn't get the context of how the music came to where it is now or something. That still happens a bit, because not everybody can hear everything. But at least in this case, there's like, when I'm releasing something that's coming from the same place, it's getting to the same people. And that's partially why I'm releasing a lot of records, like 2 records at a time. They kind of complement each other and give this package of what's happening so that you can relate it to what else is going on. I think it gives it more impact and more of a true idea of what is being created.
Yeah, that's really hip. Before I let you go, give me the names of a couple of oud players that you might recommend I go check out this weekend.
Oh, I'm kind of out of the loop on that, but you must know the main ones, like Hamza Al-Din, obviously.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm realizing more and more how much he's been a big influence on how I played. Najib Shaheen is great too. It's Simone's brother.
Oh, wow.
I really love his playing. I don't even think he records. I've just seen him play live. And then my teacher, Sarwanya Mulkey, is wonderful. He's got a record out. He's an amazing musician and poet, and he's written a bunch of poetry books, but he didn't record that much because he's like a perfectionist. It was hard, and it's hard to get things recorded, but some friends of mine made a record with him, which is great. And Avon Kang's on it, and Francois Houle's on that. Sarwanya Mulkey, one of my favorite oud players, and my teacher, Rahim Al-Haj. Do you know Rahim?
Wow. No.
He's in another Iraqi oud player. He's in Albuquerque now. He sent some stuff, which is great, and he's a good friend. We might be doing some stuff together actually coming up. And Nazir Sharma, another Iraqi oud player. Great. And of course, like Frida Latroche.
Yeah, a lot of
the major, big
names.
Yeah.
I appreciate you helping me go a little deeper though. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time and all the great music. I feel so grateful to now have that link to your Bandcamp page, and I've got a lot of listening to do.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And great to be here.
Thank you so much, Gordon Grdina. And as always, thank you for listening to Spotlight On, a production of 23 Media Ventures. I'm your host and executive producer, Lawrence Purrier. We're produced and edited by Michael Donaldson, with theme music by Q Burn's Abstract Message. If you'd like to support our work, please rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and then visit us online at spotlightonpodcast.com. There you'll find our free episode archive, weekly postings on our official blog, our online store, and a link to make a donation to support our work. Thanks for listening, be safe, and stay in touch.